There are times when you have queries already pre-built. For example, maybe your application has a query builder and all you need to do is somehow get that query over to Reveal to execute and then generate the dashboard or get into edit mode, etc. In this application, I am dynamically building queries off of a set of allowed tables that I have let my user use from the server. So for example, I will click create my first query. I'll give this a name. We'll call it shippers analysis. And I'll scroll down to one of the allowed tables from my server. A good idea when you are offering users either through the Reveal UI or your own UI a way to generate visualizations or dashboards is to give them a set of curated tables. And this is basically what would be considered a data source item in Reveal. So I'm going to select shipments. In this case, I'm listing all of the fields that are available to me. I'll select all, and I'm going to create the query. So in this UI, I have the query definition, I have a show grid button, and an edit dashboard button. When I click show grid, I'm auto-generating a grid with all of the columns that are in my query, all of those fields that I selected on the server, generating that R dash and then rendering it here in the client. This is using the Reveal SDK DOM library. You'll notice that I have paging enabled. There's 28 pages, 30 items per page. If I go back to my queries and I click edit dashboard, this is doing something a little bit different. It's actually taking that data source item and taking me directly into edit mode. In the normal flow of Reveal, you have the data source item, you might select it from the default dialog, and then you end up inside of the editor. So there's actually two steps to get to this UI. But in this case, I simply jumped right from my custom UI into the visualization editor. So I'll go ahead and I'll add a couple visualizations here. Let's modify this a little bit. I'll change the formatting to currency. I want to use large number formatting. I am going to go to settings. I'll get rid of my legend. And actually, let's go to our fixed line and change that a little bit. We'll make it a nicer color with a dashed line. And I'm going to call this employee freight shipments. And we'll just go ahead and click save. Now I have my first viz. Let's go ahead and duplicate this guy. I'm going to edit it and I'm going to get rid of employee name and let's use company or customer name this time. And we basically have a similar visualization and we'll just call this customer freight shipments. I'll check the box. Let's call this shipper analysis, just like we did our query, and I will save my dashboard. Now in my app, I could go back to queries. I could create another query and just go through and start building out dashboards. I have also added a dashboards page here, which shows the dashboards that I just created. So here's the grid and here is the dashboard. So what just happened? If I minimize this and I go to Visual Studio Code and we take a look at the server, few things that I want to point out. First off, what's under the hood when I am creating a new query, I'm actually creating a query file in my queries folder. This has the GUID. The GUID is the key to everything. The GUID is what drives my data source item in Reveal, and it drives my dashboard name, it drives the query name, it drives everything. But what happens is my service will generate this for each query. I'll get the fields that the person is selecting. I'll get the column metadata, because when I'm generating that grid automatically in Reveal, I need to have the data types from the database, and I need to know how they map to a Reveal data type. And then if I keep scrolling down, ultimately we'll see the query that was generated. I'm not doing anything fancy like joins. I'm literally taking that field list, doing a select, and it's from whatever the allowed table happened to be. That's VW shipments. If I go over to my schema folder and I look at my allowed tables, this is my allowed table. So I just simply query this. This is a display that ends up in my dialog, and then the underlying query executes against whatever the view or table name is. When you're doing your own custom queries and you're auto-generating a visualization, you do need to have the field names because you have to know the data type. So the only way that this works in Reveal when you have the fields list is that you know the data type with the Reveal SDK DOM. When you're using just straight up Reveal without using the SDK DOM, we do all of that automatically, but here you need to tell Reveal what to do. Now, if I go to my services folder, we'll see the 3 services that matter. So first we'll look at the database service, and basically what this is doing is it's picking up my connection string details for my app settings, and then it is getting the table schema. So this is the query. I'm using a Postgres database, a local Postgres database, but whatever database you're using, you get your field names, you get your field types, use that to return back to that JSON or the JSON file in the queries. My query service itself is actually generating that JSON file. So you can see here, these are the fields. I have my GUID, friendly name, description, table name fields. When I am doing that where clause, it is just a simple select with where statements, and I'm generating a valid query that will execute against Postgres, and I'm saving this out to the file. And then in the dashboard service, this is where I'm using the Reveal SDK DOM. And the Reveal SDK DOM is allowing me to dynamically generate that grid. It's very, very simple. So if we scroll down, the core of this is creating an R- document. So this is going to create that document. I'm going to create a new PostgreSQL data source. This is a type in Reveal. What do we need in a data source? Well, I need a data source item. What's going to be my data source item? Well, that's going to be that GUID that has all of the fields that I need. And then ultimately, I am creating a new grid visualization. The grid visualization has a few properties here that I'm doing in settings, like setting the page size, the font size, etc. I set the columns to the fields from the query metadata that's stored in that JSON file. I add the grid to my R- document, and then I'm saving this dashboard out to the GUID.R-name. So that shows up in my dashboards folder. On the Reveal side, if I look at the data source provider, everything happens here in change data source item async. The first thing that I'm doing is when an incoming request hits change data source item, I am checking if the SQL DSI.ID is a GUID. And if it's a GUID, what am I doing? Ultimately, I'm setting the custom query to the query data.query, which is the query from that JSON file. So I'm going to look at the GUID. I'm going to say, well, let's go into our queries folder, read the file name that is that GUID, get this query, and then I'm going to set that to the data source provider, and then Reveal just does the rest for me. This doesn't preclude me from including other checks if I have an incoming request for a SQL DSI.ID or table or procedure, etc. But this is really where that magic happens. So there's a few things on the server working together that ultimately allows you to set this custom query. However you get here is up to you. I happen to do it this way based on a GUID coming in from the client, but you just need to make sure that this file always exists, because when I generated that dashboard, the next time it runs, when I viewed it from my dashboards page, it did the same thing in the change data source item. It looked for this file, which then executed as the custom query. On the client side, I have my index HTML. This is very simple. It just has a couple of iframes in it. I have my create data grid and create dashboard. If we scroll down, you'll see that this is very simple. It's using the Reveal dependencies. I have some code to give an overlay and to hide the loading UI. But again, what am I doing? When I generate that query, I save a GUID. That GUID gets passed to this page so it knows what to set my SQL data source item that I'm going to pass to the server to ensure that custom query gets set. Now, how did I automatically bring that up in the editor? So there's two things working here. I'm overriding the default data sources dialog using the onDataSourceSelectionDialogShowing function in Reveal. When I create my data source item, I'm storing this selected DSI in the query. And essentially what this is doing is it's ensuring that when this item loads, when my data sources dialog, my custom data sources dialog loads, it has this selected DSI. And then we're doing a little bit of a backdoor here called trigger add visualization. And what this is doing is it's executing that occurs when you click the add visualization button. So we're bypassing the need for you to do that. We'll automatically do that here with this code. And that's how I jump right into edit mode. So if I go back into my default browser, we'll create a new query. I'll do employees and we'll grab this guy. I'll select all, I'll create this query. Here's my employees and I'm going to edit dashboard. So you'll notice for a split second when I do this, you will see the new entry point for start in edit mode on the Reveal view, and then it'll flick into the visualization editor. So you saw that just for a second. What I did is I added that loading indicator to sort of hide that a little bit and fade it. So it just appears that your user can go directly into here. And when I go back and I do show grid, very straightforward. You saw the code on the server side to generate the data grid in code. And all I am doing here is calling load dashboard on the Reveal view. So this is the same code that you would always use. What dashboard am I actually going to load? Well, I'm going to load up the dashboard ID. What is the dashboard ID? The dashboard ID ends up being that GUID that was generated with my query. So with that, you can create a custom user interface that gives you a unique experience to your users with Reveal while using all of the work you've already done in your own query builder to generate dashboards or even auto-generate data grids or any dashboard using the Reveal SDK DOM in conjunction with the Reveal SDK.